Okay, so now that we've maybe taken a little more time to talk about series and range and some other ways to make numbers, I wanted to go over again what I did to sort of create or take those numbers and start creating a bunch of different types of points. Okay, so there's a couple of things I'm going to do though that may be a little different this time that I hope help. I'm going to use this widget here. It's called panel. It's like a notepad. And so I'm going to put a couple of these, and I'm just going to think out in advance, and let's talk about this for just a minute. What the steps are, right? Because I have to sort of, I find that like there's two different things to learn here, right? And one, of course, is like the very specific and situational like location of things and what some certain tools are called. But conceptually, what I mean, conceptually, I think what's more important to understand is what are we doing and why and how do we make sense of it, right? So you know, I never just like open up Grasshopper for the point of doing something in Grasshopper. I always have some sort of larger objective, right? And then you know, if I'm using Grasshopper, that just happens to be the tool that I think will best help me accomplish that. So in this case, what we're talking about is making a grid of points. Okay, and so if I think about making a grid, making a point, or making a set of points, right? That's going to be the last step, make points, right? When I get to this step, make points, I'm done. It's awesome. I'll have a bunch of points, okay? Now, what do I have to do in order to make points? I have to make x and y and z coordinates, right? And we talked about that. X, y, and z coordinates by making numbers, making a list of numbers. Okay. All right. So how do I make a list of numbers? Right. We talked about using the series widget. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put in parentheses here, series, right? And what I found is that, you know, whether I'm doing this with the notepad here in Grasshopper, sometimes that happens, but usually I'm like, I'm like using a piece of paper or my sketchbook, and I'm quite literally drawing or writing these things out in English, so I don't miss a step. And so I can maybe plan this out a little bit in advance so I don't get lost in the actual interface, right? So there's the technical ability of being able to execute this, but honestly, understanding the recipe itself and what the ingredients need to be and how I get from the start to the end is really the important part here, I would argue. Okay, so I'm going to make x, y, and z coordinates, right? And then the interesting thing about those x, y, and z coordinates is that there was a special thing that we did to begin to match them up in a certain way to make a grid, right? And we called that, I'll just refresh your memory here briefly. We'll come back to this, so don't worry. But if I go to list, right, there's that cross-reference widget. So I want to sort of cross-reference each coordinate with every other coordinate. Okay. And so what we'll do is let's see, so we're going to make a list of numbers, we're going to cross-reference them, then we're going to try to make some points. Maybe we don't need this fourth panel. I'll go ahead and delete that. Okay. All right. So we're going to make some coordinates, and let's start here, right? So we know that we need a point widget. So we need to make a point, in this case, several points, right? And so I can go to the Vectors tab, find points, construct points, using an x, a y, and a z. 1x, 1y, and 1z will make 1 point, as we mentioned before, right? The nice thing about this is that if we want to make multiple points, we can add it, we can push multiple input parameters, right? And then suddenly it'll match up the data in a certain way and push out multiple points, right? So here's that sort of economy of scale, right? Grasshopper is not very fast if you're making 1 point, right? But if I need to make 500 points really fast, now suddenly Grasshopper is my tool of choice, right? So what we need to do is we need to generate a list of numbers to become for x and a list of numbers for y and even a list of numbers for z if we want, okay? And so we're going to go back over here and let's think about the ways we can make a list of numbers, right? So we go to the Sets tab, and I'm going to use series again to do that, okay? Series is a way to make a list of numbers using the first number and then the step size for each successive number, and then the number of the amount of numbers that we want. Okay, And of course, we can make these parameters a variable by using sliders for them if we want. Oops, I accidentally dumped that one there. So in this case, I'm going to tell it the step size. I'll leave it the step size at 1. I mean, but maybe the number of steps. I'm going to change to integers, and I'm going to up this up to something larger, like between 0 and 30, and that way we can generate something here. Okay, so let's just check and see what this is giving. This is giving us 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? And of course, we can make more and more numbers depending on adjusting this number slider here. Okay, great. Now, if we take this list of numbers, right, and we plug it in for x, right, then what's interesting is that x has 5 values that are being passed to it: 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Y still just has a 0, and z still just has a 0. Okay, and so what we end up with is a point at 0, 0, 0, right? And then the next point, right, uses the second value that we plugged in for x, 1. But then there's no other values for y and z to use, so it uses the last known value of 0 and 0. So then we'll get a point at 1, 0, 0, and then a point at 2, 0, 0, and then a point at 3, 0, 0, and 4, 0, 0. Okay, and you can see that here. So you see a list of 5 points along the x-axis, right? So x is stepping up, but y and z are remaining the same for all of these points. Okay. If I did the same thing for y and plug in the same number or list, right? Now suddenly I get 0, 0, 0, and then 1, 1, 0, 2, 2, 0, 3, 3, 0, and 4, 4, 0. Okay. Now if I want to create a grid, then I need to find a way to make 0, 0, 0, and then 1, 0, 0, 2, 0, 0, all the way to 4, 0, 0. But then I also need to make 1, 0, 0, and then 1, 1, 0, and then 1, 2, 0, and then 1, 3, 0, and on, and then 2, 0, 0, and then 2, 1, 0, 2, 2, 0, right? And so what cross-reference does is it does this calculation for us, okay? And so I'm going to place the widget here. By default, it has two inputs, so it'll cross-reference the inputs from this list but towards the inputs in this list, okay? All right, and so now that once I've cross-referenced those, I'm going to replace these, right? And now I have a grid, okay? So for every 0, every value in my list for A gets compared to every value in the list for B. So I have 0, 0, and 0, 1, and 0, 2, and 0, 3, and 0, 4, and then 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, and then 2, 0, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 4, on, okay? So that gives us our grid of points. And of course, we can change the number or the amounts in our grid of points, right? By changing the number of values in the original series of numbers that we create and then cross-reference in order to create these x and y coordinates, okay? So here we're making a list of numbers. Here we're cross-referencing those. And then here we plug them in as x, y, z coordinates to make a set of points, all right? Now, what I want to do is maybe illustrate this just a little further, because I think it might help understand what cross-reference is really doing. Okay, so I'm going to make a different, or maybe add on to this. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this list of points, right? So we have 11 rows and 11 columns of points. 11 times 11 is 121. So no surprise, we have 121 points. Okay, let's say I want to make a line between every point in this list to every other point in the list. Oh, now that's kind of different, right? So let's look at this. First of all, I'm going to go to the curves tab because a line is a curve, right? Just happens to have 0 curvature. Okay, and I'm going to create a line using a start point and end point. Now, what happens if I just plug in this list of points for the start point and the same list of points for the end point? I end up with a bunch of lines with 0 length, okay? And so what's happening is that I have this list of points, and so the first point for the starts are being is being connected with with a line to the first point, or in this set of endpoints, right? Let me just back up there because maybe I wasn't verbally clear there. Okay, I have this list of points, and I'm plugging them in for both the start and the end. And so the first point here is the same as the first point here, and therefore, when it connects those up with a line, it's connecting the same point with a line. You don't get a line, right? You get a line with 0 length, right? Okay, and so what we need to do is actually give it different instructions to make this work. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'll just delete this instead of trying to disconnect all of these things. It's easier just to re-add this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cross-reference this list of points against itself. Okay. What that's going to do is cross-reference the first point to the second, the third, and the fourth, all the way to the 121st point. And then it's going to take the second point. It's going to cross-reference it to the first, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth, all the way to the 121st. And it's going to do that for every set in the list. And therefore, then we can take the outputs and plug those in, and then we can draw a line from each point to every other point, right? Which is actually, not coincidentally, one of the Sol-LeWitt wall drawings that you guys looked at as one of the examples that I gave you. So let's go ahead and find cross-reference. I'm just going to cross-reference this list of points to itself. And now I'm going to plug this one in for the start point and this one in for the end point. Okay. And what you can see is that now from this point, I've drawn a line to every other point in the set. And then also from this point, I've drawn a line to every other point in the set. And on and on and on for every point in this grid. Okay, it's quite dense. Look at that. Wowee. All right, it's like a big sea of green. Really dense, thicket of lines. So anyway, maybe that helps clear up a little bit about how cross-reference works.